Hey, everybody. Welcome to the official Do Good Better podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Kirby. And of course, we talk with people who give helpful hints and tips and tricks for our small and medium-sized nonprofit friends. But what if those small and medium-sized nonprofit friends are faith-based? Very few people talk about fundraising in such a niche industry. And I've even niched down even that. We found somebody who is designed specifically to talk about faith-based Catholic fundraising. So if you're one of those fantastic human beings that are Catholic organization and are a fundraiser, this show is specifically for you. Not that you're exclusive. You come on, we're going to learn everything together. Just fun to wrap our heads around a very niche moment here. I would love to welcome Andrew Robison. He is the owner and president of Petrus Development. Andrew, thanks for being on the official Do Good Better podcast.
That was a fantastic intro, Patrick. I certainly appreciate that, and it is a pleasure to talk with you today.
I'm super excited about it. Not that we're specifically talking about Catholic fundraising, but the extent to your background and sort of these large institutions and sort of like now how you're breaking it down and figuring out how we can use really helpful, all-inclusive tips and tricks on fundraising. I'm excited to talk about that. I'm excited to talk about a conference you've got coming up. I'm excited to talk about your podcast too. But before we get in that, right, we're looking through iTunes, we're looking through YouTube, and all of a sudden we see Petrus Development. This sounds awesome. I don't know who Andrew is, though, so we should let them know a little bit about you. So from a 5,000-foot view, who on earth are you? What do you do? And how on earth did you become the owner and president of Petrus Development?
Thank you, Patrick. It's always a pleasure to talk about myself, right? That's why I do this podcast. No, I joke. So I live in Texas, which, as you mentioned, we had a little bit of cold weather. We got to experience what you experienced to a very small degree, and we realized we were completely and totally unprepared for it. But that's okay. We are moving forward as Texans do, making the best of it. So I live in Texas. I have lived in Texas most of my life. I went to school at Texas A&M University. I studied history, minored in business. And after I graduated, I thought, what the heck am I going to do? And my dad used to say, you could study history, but there's no future in history. And I said, thanks, Dad. But I was involved in the Catholic Center at A&M. St. Mary's Catholic Center is a great Catholic center there. And so the development director called me one day and said, hey, Andrew, I want to talk to you about a job. And I said, great. I don't know what you do, but I would love to talk about a job. So long story short, I ended up getting a job as the assistant director of development for St. Mary's Catholic Center right out of college. And they just so happened to be an opportunity to then start working on my master's degree. So there's a school in Minnesota, St. Mary's University in Winona, Minnesota, that has a master's of arts and philanthropy and development. And so my boss said, hey, if we help pay for it, will you stick around until you graduate? And I said, yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me. So I ended up pursuing my master's degree. I did that by distance learning. I finished that in about 2008, excuse me. And then sort of started looking for an opportunity to, spread my wings, do a little bit more. So my wife and I moved up to Columbus, Ohio, worked at the Newman Center at Ohio State University, and did that for 3 years. Had a great experience, but had an opportunity to move back to Texas in 2011. And so I did that and went to work for the Texas A&M Foundation, raising money for the College of Medicine. So a departure from my previous 8 years in fundraising, but it was a great experience. I really enjoyed working for the university. Did that for about 7 years, close to 7 years, and then had the opportunity to come on full-time with Petrous. I had been working part-time as a consultant since 2012. And so I knew the organization. I loved it. I knew the opportunities that were available to the organization, to the institution, to the firm, to our clients. And so I said, yeah, let's do it. And so I came on full-time as a president in 2017. And the end of 2019, I finalized the purchase of the company, which was really exciting at the time. And then 3 months later, everything fell apart. And I thought, oh my God, what have I done? I bought a company 3 months before the world shut down, literally. So we definitely pivoted a lot in 2020. We started doing a lot more stuff virtual. We had already been doing the podcast. We've been doing some webinars, but we kicked that into high gear. And it's been a really exciting year, a lot of change, but just a lot of opportunity and growth. And now we're just looking forward to more opportunities to work with great institutions all over the country and all over the world, really. So it's been fun.
Fantastic. So if Petrous in general, if you were to sort of give an elevator pitch on what that does, because there's a lot of organizations that do a lot of fundraising help. You specifically, how would you describe your position as Petrous in general in the fundraising realm?
Sure. So Petrous is unique from a lot of other consulting firms in that we teach organizations how to fundraise. And so, a lot of, especially in the Catholic space, if a church needs a new parish or, they need a new center, or they need a new activity center, or they need a new roof, they hire a consulting firm and they will come and do the fundraising for them. They get it built, which is great. It accomplishes exactly what they need at that time. We take a little bit of a different approach where we want to empower and teach the team to be able to understand fundraising principles, build a sustainable foundation for fundraising so that they can continue to fundraise for whatever their needs are over time. That also means that we work with a lot of really small, very early stage organizations that have never done fundraising, have never had anybody even remotely close to full time. And so we help guide organizations, institutions, leaders through that process, teach them the foundations, and then hopefully get them in a position where they can continue to grow their team, grow their initiatives, and do more. We say all the time that money follows mission and mission follows money. The reality is that if an organization has more money, they can accomplish more mission. And so that's really what drives us. We've got a team of about 14 on our staff all over the country. 3 of us are in Texas, but we've got folks in St. Louis and California and Indiana and Mississippi, all over. I had a guy that worked for us for a time in Fargo. So always loved working with Kyle. And so that's a little bit about Petrous and what we do.
Fantastic. It's like my Texas brethren from Fargo. That's how I feel about that. Also, similar background. I graduated from college with a politics degree, which meant I didn't have a job either. And then my first job was out of in my old Catholic high school, and where they asked me like, "Hey, we got a job that we just think might be working for you, like doing events and fundraising with alumni." And I go, "Yeah, don't really have a plan, so this sounds great." So I appreciate that as a background because that seems like we're on the right path.
Sounds like it.
Let's talk about pandemic faith-based fundraising. Can't go to church. You're doing it all online. You're looking at coffers that are a little, I would imagine, less than what they were a couple of months prior to. What is the first conversation that you begin to have with clients or individuals who are reaching out to you and saying, "Listen, our community is super strong. They're great. They want to give. They want to help. But we're now in a position where, how the hell do you pass the hat when you don't have a hat to pass because nobody's in the pews?" What does that first initial conversation look like as you sort of enter this pandemic? Because I think a lot of organizations, regardless if they're a church or they're any sort of institution, had that same sort of like, whoa boy moment. And what were your sort of thoughts when you first sort of like the world shut down?
Yeah, that's it was a crazy time in March. I remember my phone email was just blowing up with people saying, "What in the heck do we do now?" So unfortunately, the church has a sort of a history of being a little bit behind the times. You could say that
No, I don't believe
you could
this.
say that the church, a 2,000-year-old institution, plays the long game, right? Which is great. But it also means that they're not really the early adapters of technology. Innovation kind of comes when it comes. And so I know a number of people that either run, website development firms or they do, online giving, and they said that their number of calls in March was, exponentially greater because every church is saying, "Oh my gosh, if we don't have people sitting in the pews, how in the world are we going to survive, first of all, but make it so that people can still live out their Catholic faith through giving, through tithing, through supporting and I'm saying Catholic, but really just any faith is giving. Generosity is a part of any of our practice of faith. And so that was part of it. The first couple of questions are, can you accept online gifts? Do you have a mechanism for tracking people that want to give to you that aren't there? And so that was, the first couple of questions is, how do you do that? Then after that, then it was kind of a question of, all right, what are you doing to communicate with your constituents, with your parishioners, with your members? And are you continuing to engage even though you're not seeing them? So a very brief story that kind of illustrates the good and the bad that can come from, that becomes apparent in those situations. We work with a ministry. It's a campus ministry up in Michigan, and they're up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, 500 miles away from civilization. But they do really great work, and they do a really great job communicating. And they were doing they are doing a capital campaign, and a member of the campaign committee, I was on a call, campaign committee call, and it had been a couple of months, and he said, he lives down in the lower peninsula or lower part of Michigan. And he said, Father, I just want to commend you for the work that you're doing to continue to communicate, whether it's by email, whether it's, your presence online on social media, but I just feel really connected to you, which is great. What it's also doing though, is it's making me feel how disconnected I am from my local parish, because they really haven't done anything, which was a tragedy in one respect, but a tremendous opportunity for learning and for affirmation on the other. And so what we saw over the course of, the last year is the ministries that either were already doing a good job communicating, were already making it possible for people to continue to support and continue to engage. They weathered the COVID storm pretty well, right? There were some that, had a little bit of challenges, but we didn't see the massive drops in giving or engagement. And even the ones that pivoted very quickly, organizations that said, hey, we're shut down, we'll see you again in 6 to 9 months when we're open. They're in a bad spot right now, and it's a tragedy in that respect, because they kept waiting. They kept saying, well, this is a short-term thing, we'll just wait it out. And as it is right now, we're still waiting it out. And so anyways, the point being, the answer your question is, organizations that pivoted or that were already implementing just solid practices, communication, and make it possible for your donors to continue to support, are doing all right and actually growing. And organizations that didn't make that pivot or didn't recognize that need to change are struggling.
I think a lot of nonprofits hear something like that and say, oh, well, I don't have a giant game plan of, I don't have the ability to write War and Peace. I don't have a lot to say. My content might be a little screwy. Like I think they think in order to communicate, you have to have this wonderful game plan of a million and a half things. I don't think that's the case. It just has to be purposeful and authentic rather than long or super complex. Am I wrong there? Because I feel like that is something that nonprofits worry themselves to death about, and then they freeze and they don't do anything.
You're absolutely right. And it's this fear, and I don't want to do it wrong, so I'm not going to do anything.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge. You're absolutely right about the need to be authentic. And so I'll go back to that story just briefly, or that ministry up in the Upper Peninsula. Every year for the last 4 years, they have done a chapel in the snow. They get a lot of snow up there. And so they built a chapel and they celebrate mass out there. And the first year they did it kind of as oh, this will be fun. We have so much snow. What can we do with this? Let's make a chapel. And it was a big hit. People loved it. And so they've continued to do it. Well, this year, doing that chapel, which is nothing, I mean, literally, it's them in the snow. They're a bunch of engineers, so they use forms and they do it correct. They like actually build if it was me building a chapel, like I'd pile up some snow and say, are we good yet? No, they do it really well. But it's just, it's still sticking with the foundation of their faith, which is to celebrate the sacraments. They're just doing it outdoors in the snow, right? That event this year, in part because so many more people are online, and there's just this hunger for good news. But pictures and stories of that have been shared literally worldwide. Father Ben has been posting links from newspapers in India, in the UK, in South America. They're in every language about this chapel in the snow, and it's not. Again, they're being innovative, they're being creative, but they didn't go into this with this strategy of let's come up with something super complex and super creative that is going to drive interest. They went back to say, we want to celebrate mass, we want to celebrate the sacraments, we have a lot of snow, let's do that and take some pictures and put it online. And it's exploded. And so, to your point, there's not a need to go with the most radical idea that you can come up with. It's what's more important, and what actually gets picked up and noticed more is staying authentic to who you are, talking about the foundation of what you're doing, why it's important, the impact you're making, and getting that story out there. And people are hungry for that, and they're eager to hear it, and they're eager to engage as a result of hearing it.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes total sense. Here's the question that I think a lot of people who might have similar individuals who give to their organizations, like a Catholic church, which are older individuals who still write checks, and older individuals in a pandemic who still write checks, has to be a challenge that you've probably faced. And maybe we can talk a little bit through how creative engagement in a pandemic, trying to figure out how to get them to donate because they've got most of the cash anyway. How do we start having that conversation with supporters and donors who are of an older generation that maybe cryptocurrency isn't their donation of choice, but writing out the check and then using an envelope they've held for the last 27 years to send it in? How do we interact with those individuals while we're still in this pandemic sort of hands off, let's stay 12 feet apart kind of thing?
Yeah. So that's a great question. And I think it's a real issue. So I'll tell you about a strategy that we've been talking about with a lot of our clients and ministries that blends this, right? And this is the idea of doing virtual fundraising events. So, how many organizations, whether they're faith-based or not, have done a big gala every year or a big auction every year? They get as many people together as they can. They sit them at the tables. They feed them a rubber chicken. They have a great program, and then they ask them for money, whether it's through an auction, whether it's, raise the paddle, whatever it is. And this year, they literally are not allowed to do that. And even if they tried, nobody would come, right? We're starting to see that shift a little bit. But for the last year, that's been the reality. So what are these organizations doing to capture those people that would be the people that are coming, that are writing the checks, or that's how they give? They're not sending their Bitcoin to Father, right? They want to be there. They want to see you open the gift, and they want to participate in that way. So what we're seeing, though, is this shift to these virtual galas, which is a different dynamic, right? It's watching it on a screen that doesn't appeal to everybody, and I understand that. But what we're saying is it doesn't have to be either or. Like, why can't you make it both? And so the successful virtual events actually blend this idea of this annual fund. We want a lot of people giving small amounts. And in this case, because it's virtual, you can literally have people all over the world, and not just the people that can come that day. But we want that because that, if they're new donors, that enters them into the pipeline. If they've been given to you for a couple of years, that continues that relationship. But that's your volume type of gifts, those annual fund, $50, $100 gifts. But the major successful virtual events are also allowing people and engaging the major gift donors as well. And so they're asking people, we're going to have this virtual event. What we'd really like to do is to post a challenge, right? So we think we can raise $10,000. Would you be willing to make a $10,000 gift? And they're asking this either in person or virtuals, but it's a face-to-face interaction, right? That goes back to that people that have the money, they want to see you, and they want to see that ask being made. Excuse me. But they're saying, we want to post a $10,000 challenge. Would you consider making a gift and being the challenge sponsor, or $100,000 or whatever it is? And so then that 10,000 is leveraged to get more people to give $100. And so it's the blending of the annual fund and the major gifts, which then allows people that aren't going to go online and watch the event or aren't going to go online and make their gift online, they can still engage. There's one ministry that I'll tell you about. It's a Catholic high school in Omaha. And every year they do a big gala and auction, and it's their major fundraiser. They raise, over $500,000 in this night. Well, they had to go virtual this last year, and so they cut out the live auction, right? So they just did the silent auction, and then they don't have table sponsors, but they still approached the people that had been giving and asked them to support and engage. And so what they did was they kind of, dumped all of that money that they would have raised for those things into their Raise the Paddle. Their Raise the Paddle sort of segment of their fundraising it surpassed what they had done in the entire fundraising event the year before. So it was just this idea of, all right, we can't just say, let's not ask them because they're not going to be here in person. They figured out how to ask them and still engage them in the event. And those people actually really enjoyed it, and they got really involved, and they got really excited about supporting it. So, you can still fundraising, and this, Patrick, but fundraising has been and always will be about relationships. You're building relationships. You engage people in your ministry or your organization. You show them the impact, and you ask them to make it possible for you to do more of that impact. And whether you're doing that online, whether you're doing that in person, whether you're doing that by check, by Bitcoin, whatever it is, it's always still going to come down to the relationship. And so fundraisers that are investing their time in COVID or whatever the situation is in building those relationships and continuing that, they're going to be successful, and their ministries are going to continue to raise money now and long into the future.
Stop waiting for it to be perfect. Start making and then calling people now, because if you don't, somebody else is, and it's the worst thing to wait. And I know there's a lot of organizations who are still maybe they're crawling out from under their, sort of COVID hibernation, and they're looking around going, what sort of world did we now just end up in, with just the hybrid moments but you still have to ask. You still have to get on the phone. You still have to get in front of them, either virtually or in person. You have to make an ask, and you have to make a play. People want to give. They've got the capacity to do so. But they need a reason, and they need some direction. And that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to shepherd them to a direction that makes them feel great about what they're doing in the first place. You brought up something else, though, which is annual plus major gifts, etc. I always use the example of when you're doing a special project or capital campaign, and somebody says, well, hey, we're just going to rob Peter to pay Paul. Get to use this finally in a conversation with somebody who clearly gets that reference.
Hey, I know who those guys are. That's great.
Yeah, we know who that is. But instead of saying that capital campaigns are going to take away from annual campaigns, because that is a scarcity mindset that I think a lot of organizations have when they have these large projects looming. I'd love you to kind of talk a little bit about how your clients, or kind of how people that you have worked with, deal with this. Because I've always said, listen, if you're going to build a new gym, Preet's going to come out, pastor's going to come out and say, hey, we need to build a new gym. Here, we're going to pass around the hat. It does not exempt you from the second pass of the hat, which is your weekly expectation. It's in addition to. But I think that's a really big hurdle to overcome, especially when you've got organizations who are like, but I don't want to ask too much because they won't give to me, and I got to make it up on the back end. Walk me through your process here, because that will help alleviate some stress as folks are listening and kind of getting their brains wrapped around how we can do two fundraisers at once. That's stressful. De-stress me.
Yeah, I'll give an example of a situation where it went really well and proves the point that you're making, that it's okay to ask twice. It's okay to ask multiple times. There is a ministry in Oklahoma, in Stillwater, and they are the Catholic Center for the students at Oklahoma State University. Sorry, I hope you edit that out, because they do not like being called Ohio State. Okay,
I'm a Notre Dame fan. I don't like Ohio State either, so it's fine.
Good. Yeah. We can all agree on that.
Yeah.
So Oklahoma State University. So a couple of years ago, they there's two parishes in town. I'll give you just the slightest bit of background. There's two parishes in town. Both had parishioners. One had students and parishioners. So they decided, among everybody, that they really wanted to make one a student parish and kind of transition everybody, all the parishioners, over to the other parish. And they did it, and it was successful. But then they realized they needed to tear down the student parish and build a new one. So they needed a lot of money to be able to do that.
Right.
So what you're looking at is a situation where they want to raise a lot of money, but they've basically just transitioned all of their like regular donors, the Sunday collection people, over to another parish. And so they, they planned for this, but they also were kind of like, we need to figure this out, Andrew. Like, what are we going to do? And so they had a couple of lead donors for the project, multi-million-dollar lead donors for the project. And so who said, I'm going to give you a lot of money to build this building. Right. And so, but then as it kind of started to go and they started this campaign, they started to get a little bit stressed about, well, what about our annual fund? Like, we don't have people that are writing us big checks for that. So what they ended up doing is they went back to those lead donors and they said, and they sat down, they had an honest conversation. You're giving a lot of money to help us build this building, which is great. It's incredible. It's the future of our ministry. But we still have a couple of years where we have to continue to exist and keep our ministry going. So in addition to that, would you consider a multi-year pledge, a large pledge, but a smaller than their major capital gift, a multi-year pledge just for operations? And the reason that we need that is because we've, they laid it out. We've, lost some revenue from, this change in parishioner status. And, and also a lot of our people, are giving to the campaign. So would you consider doing this? And both of them, they were like, yeah, why wouldn't we? Like, it totally makes sense. And it was just a matter of they needed to be asked. They were asked. They gave it some thought, and they said, "Yeah, we're in." And so that's an example of the people, even the people that made the largest gifts to the campaign, that are the most kind of terrifying to irritate and go back and say, "Well, are we going to ask them again? Like, they already gave us a lot of money." Yeah, go ask them again. And they're smart people. Lay out your case. Explain the impact that their gifts, both gifts, will have on the ministry, and ask them to consider to do that. And they said, okay. And they had such great responses that it was like, why didn't we do this with why aren't we doing this with everybody? And so that's a case where it worked really well. And I think that is much more common. That the situation where it works really well is going to happen a lot more often than situations where you ask somebody and they say, wait a minute, you already asked me for a gift. Like, you can't come back again. The people that say that are, we might get some of those, but they're going to be far, far fewer, especially if we're prudent and we make strategic decisions on how we communicate that need, to that are going to, the response is going to be much more positive, is my point. But I'm a fundraiser, been doing this a long time. I've asked thousands of people for gifts, and I can still remember the one gift where I asked a guy and he basically kicked me out of his office, right? So that's human nature. But if I was to say, hey, that guy kicked me out of my office, surely everybody's going to do that. I would have flamed out as a fundraiser years ago. So we have to be resilient as fundraisers and as nonprofit leaders to say, hey, there's a little bit of a risk, but if we're smart about it, then we can minimize that risk, and we can be far more successful if we're bold and we get out there and we make those asks and we make those invitations.
And that's what it is. It's an invitation to help. People want to help. They understand that this is a separate project, and it's great. And the other thing too is that your annual donors want to be a part of a capital campaign or a large project as well.
No doubt about it.
They might not have the ability to give 5, 6, 7-figure checks, but they can give something in addition to whatever their annual gift is too. So don't exclude them from your asks. Say, hey, we've got a smaller piece to this campaign. We'd love you to participate there. Now they feel vested in the success of it anyway. They're going to get their annual gifts in addition to it. And now you've got a better team and a more sort of a resourceful group of individuals that you can sort of go to. And then you're not excluding anybody. Everybody feels part of it, and you win on both angles of that thing. So I just absolutely love that. I would be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about a conference that you have coming up. So it's the Petrus Leadership Conference in June. I know you did it virtually last year, and it's great. We like doing that thing too. But I like the audacious attitude of saying we're going to do it in person this year. Talk to us a little bit about your leadership conference, what it entails, when it is, how can we go? Tell us all the details. I want to learn more.
Yes. So virtual happy hour was fun, but I assure you that in-person happy hour is going to be a lot more fun and enjoyable. No
Agreed.
question.
Yeah.
Everybody agrees on that. So, yeah, so we've been doing this conference for years, and really it's just an opportunity to bring together people with a goal of two things. One is we want to have great speakers who are giving tactical and inspiring and educational lessons and advice to the people that are attending. So you leave after 3 days and say, wow, I know how to fundraise a little bit better now. And I'm really inspired and excited to go out and do it.
Mhm.
So that's our first goal. The second goal, though, is, and this is why having it in person is so important to us, is as much as we want to teach people how to fundraise and inspire them to go out and do it, we want we want to build community among fundraisers just as much. And so I can tell you, I've been doing this for 15 years. Some of my closest colleagues in fundraising, I met at conferences
Yeah.
12, 13, 14, 15 years ago. And I built that relationship. So when, there were challenges in my career when I was kind of like, all right, do I move to Ohio or do I not? Do I take this opportunity or do I not? Like I have people that are totally disconnected from the situation, but that know me and that I can say, hey, I'm really thinking about this. What do you think? Call them up and ask them a question. But I met him at a conference. And so I have found the value of building community. And so I really want to, I want to encourage and I want to nurture that through our conference. So all that to say that virtual conferences are great on the first piece. They're really challenging to create community and to build community on the second piece. We did some things. We tried with our virtual conference and I think it helped, but I can't tell you how excited I am to be in person again. So anyways, that's a little bit about the why behind and what we want to accomplish. The conference is going to be in Breckenridge, Colorado. It's a terribly there's nothing beautiful. There's nothing exciting about Breckenridge, right?
No, not at all. No, you'll hate it. If you don't
No.
don't like nature or trees or mountains, you'll hate this place.
You will. Yes, it's terrible. So, Breckenridge, Colorado, June 7th through 9th. We've got really great speakers lined up. We've got some Air Force veterans who are going to come and talk about grit and how do you keep going when you're really challenged. We'll have nonprofit leaders who are going to be talking about how do you build a strategy around your vision and how do you build a team to help you to accomplish that vision. We'll have communication directors who are going to say, what do you do in a crisis situation when the entire world blows up, your world blows up? How do you communicate that to your donors in a way that you keep them involved and engaged? So we'll have a lot of content. It's going to be really great in that regard, and I'm just really looking forward to seeing folks that I haven't seen in a couple of years.
It's going to be fantastic. We'll link all those things in the show notes. And I'd be remiss even more if I didn't mention that you yourself have a podcast. Let's go send some love over to our friends. Where is it? Where can I find it? What is it about? Talk to me about this.
Yeah, it's a Petrus Development show. We're in our third season now. It started as I just want to get my friends together and ask them really personal questions that I've never been able to ask them about their career and about their background. And it was fun. I enjoyed doing it. I've got a great editor who takes everything and makes me sound just even a little bit more intelligent and brilliant. And so anyways, we've been doing that. It's a lot of fun. I interview people much like you do. And, I try to get a collection of people that have different backgrounds, different histories. We talk about their lessons that they've learned in fundraising. It's been a lot of fun. We did a little bit of a shift this spring where I handed the mic over to two people of the team, Tara and Sarah, and they really focused in on women in philanthropy. And so they did a couple of episodes about that specific topic, which was great. As women in philanthropy, they're supremely equipped to have those conversations. And I think it went really well. So that was a lot of fun. We're planning some other podcast change shifts and innovations upcoming in the year. That'll be a lot of fun too. But yeah, I appreciate you mentioning it. Come on over, join us. We're on iTunes. We're on, oh gosh, if you can't find our podcast, then let me know and we'll put it up there because it's everywhere. I go and I look at the analytics every now and then and where people are listening. I'm like, I didn't even know that existed. That's pretty cool.
You and me both. I know it's the weirdest thing in the entire world. It's the coolest thing. but it's the weirdest.
It is.
Andrew, thank you so much for being a guest today. Super insightful, super great stuff. Tangible takeaways today. I really appreciated the candor and knowing somebody's got a relatively same background as me. We'll make it someday. It's going to be fantastic. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for being a guest on the official Do Good Better podcast.
Hey, it was my pleasure, Patrick. I really enjoy I enjoyed the conversation. You're a lot of fun. This was great, and I hope your listeners got a little bit out of it.
I know they did. And do yourself a favor, click on all the links below. Check out the conference, check out the podcast, go email Andrew and ask him a bunch of questions, and it'll be great. So appreciate you sticking around. Thanks for being here, guys.